You're at your old trusty boat. You call mighty sparrow. I'm in the city of Mardi Gras.
Welcome to the Sailing into Oblivion podcast. I'm your host, Jerome Rand. Greetings, everybody. Welcome to the show, coming to you from the green forests of northern Michigan. Yes, that's right. The trees are spitting their leaves out in all their glory. The trilliums are just about ready to pop, and I've even seen a few morel mushrooms, which is a sure sign of spring. We've had a couple of days in the 70s, and holy cow, this part of the country changes so much. That change is absolutely fantastic. It's amazing. We had a nice sunny day. I think we're going to lose some of this temperature pretty soon. It's kind of back and forth between 50s and raining and 70s and sunny, but I will take it. I love a little bit of variation and variety in my environment, which is probably why I like sailing so much, because even though you're on the same ocean day after day after day, it always is changing just enough to make it interesting. But today, I just figured we'd do a quick little podcast because I just got an email in from Steven, shout out, on Sailing Vessel Horizon. And he had listened to the conversation I had with John Bilger, founder of Predict Wind, which I thought was just super cool. I'm loving getting some of these heavy hitters. I know the audio's not 100% great, but hey, it's pretty cool to hear from some of these people. And I don't know, the fact that we were doing that from opposite sides of this planet, I think there's something to be said about that tech. So it's definitely worth it for me. And though I won't say his name, tomorrow I have scheduled a conversation with a fellow sailor, kind of a heavy hitter, an author, and that one should be pretty good. I'll put that one out pretty much toot sweet after I've done it. But I figured I'd sneak in a little Monday evening one because Steven kind of wrote in about how much he really, really likes paper charts. And I couldn't agree more. I wouldn't ever want to go out there without them. I think not only are they an aid to navigation, but I think they're an aid to a bygone era and a sort of feeling of, hard to describe exactly what it feels like when you are marking your path across an endless ocean via a pencil and some parallels and a paper chart under the dim light of the nav station. There's something just romantic about that. You can't, I love it. And I love having the historical record when the trip is over and I can look back on it. And yes, it's a tedious thing. You got to do it every 3 hours, 6 hours, whatever, depending on the voyage. Some of my charts, it was every day, just at noon. And then there was like the full world chart where I would do it every like 2 or 3 days. So, you have to vary it up a little bit, but it's wonderful. It's this old classic way that you can pinpoint your position on a featureless environment. And I think there's something to be said for it. And I don't know. It kind of begs the whole question of what do you need to go out there? What really is essential with all this technology that's coming at us? And granted, I think the smart thing always to say here is utilize every aid to navigation that you possibly can. But having said that, just because you have those aids to navigation on your boat, are they the ones that you really want to be using all the time? That's a good question. That's what we're going to get into on today's show. But before we start the show, like I always say, if you want to help support this podcast and future adventures, you can head over to Patreon. There's a link in the description. Help support me out. I threw some new tiers, some pretty ambitious ones as well, out there to see if we can get some fundraising going. I'm actually going to be reaching out to some corporations and things like that for this upcoming voyage if it actually gets off of the ground floor, just because, you know, if there's a company that can slice away a couple of $1,000, that's literally months of saving for me. And so it basically allows me to be able to get sort of the equipment that I really, really want instead of, I guess we'll just do without that. So that being said, all the other links are in there. I did just finish the children's book audio version, which is available on Apple Books and also available on, I think, iTunes, I guess, and Audible. It's like 30 minutes long. It's the complete set of all 6 of the children's books, and I think it makes a pretty good bedtime story. So check that one out. Link in the description for that. And other than that, if you want to reach out to the show, sailingintoOblivion.com. New section in there is all about coaching, and that's essentially where we do a virtual sort of coaching session and consultation, if you will. And those have been going really, really great. They've been a lot of fun. I'll have to hit up some of the last few people who have done it and see if they'll write a little testimonial that I can throw on that page as well. But hey, we could talk anything. We could talk sailing tech. We could talk passage planning. We could talk finding boats. We could talk anxiety. We can talk all the mental stuff about being out there and the fears, because believe it or not, I have them and I deal with them, and I don't let them stop me from going out and getting a little ocean time. So that being said, check all that stuff out. It all helps support the podcast and future adventures and me being able to share my experiences out there with all of you. Whew. All right, done. That is good. Paper charts. There is just something about it. And, it's one of those things where it's, in today's world, you have such reliable tech. You can get a handheld GPS device that runs on batteries, and you can have a little solar thing, and you can have rechargeable batteries, and you can have backups of those. And you know what? Almost 100%. You can even throw those in the oven when there's a lightning storm, just like John had talked about. And, well, hey, chances that all that is going to fail is so minimal. It'd be like 0.001% chance. So it's tiny. It's very, very reliable. And, I would say, devil's advocate, it's probably as reliable as a chart, because a chart can catch on fire. A chart can get swept overboard. A chart can tear in half, or a chart can just malfunction, although I've never seen it, where maybe it gets a little bit wet and now all of a sudden it dissolves on your chart table and you can't use it. Granted, I've never heard that ever happening, and I have watched my charts literally mildew and mold slowly across the Pacific, and I laminated them, so I still keep that as a nice little keepsake. So that's pretty cool. But which one do you use? What do you utilize? You've got all these different things coming at you. Let's list a few of them out. Old school, you got a chart. That's your tracker. Boom, that's your chart plotter, old-timey style. You need a pencil. You need a couple of other little things, some parallels and some dividers. Boom, you've got the charts for the waters you're going in. That will keep you safe. Bare bones, that's all you need. And you've got a compass. So you got your charts, you got your compass, you get a barometer, you got a pretty decent idea about the weather, or at least approaching low and high pressure systems. That's what we used to go with. That was pretty much it. That is 99% of what I'm relying on when I go out to sea. Now, barring that shiny new technology of the AIS, Automatic Identification System, that one, boy, that one's really hard to let go of. You could throw a whole bunch of radar reflectors up in your rig, but as a solo sailor, when you're technically breaking international maritime law by not having anybody on watch, because you do have to go to sleep, that's the exception I make. Back in the day, you just have some really, really well-lit nav lights. You got your radar reflector up there, and you go down and maybe sleep for 15 minutes. I don't understand how people do that. I've never been able to do that. Typically, I will sleep between an hour and, well, depending on where I am and what the traffic's like. Because, again, out on the ocean, sometimes weeks will go by and I will not see a single other ship, not even appear on the AIS, so they're nowhere even near me. Let alone, let's talk Southern Ocean, 4.5 months, 4 ships, 2 of them underneath New Zealand. In those circumstances, yeah, I've been known to sleep for 6 hours at a time, pretty easily, without much worry, and come to find out that my AIS wasn't even working back then. Gotta love that. But what do you need? What do you need to keep you safe, bare bones, without all the tech? Get your chart for tracking. Hey, if you really want to go old school, grab that sextant, grab a little instruction book, grab the almanac, and you can get around on that as well. I mean, they're doing it in the Golden Globe race every couple of years, so it's not impossible by any means. Now, that one is a little tricky, though, especially in some areas where you get a lot of cloud cover. Holy smoke, or fog. I mean, you might not be able to get your noon sight in or any star sights or anything like that for a long time. So that one is a little sketchy, I would say. I would put a sextant, using a sextant, in a category of it's a hobby at this point. It just truly is, because GPS is so reliable and you can typically have so many different things, so many different devices on your boat that are spitting out that little GPS Latin long. It's gone kind of the way of the dodo for sure. But again, I will say it's an aid to navigation if you know how to use it, or at least you have the right instruction book that you can understand, and you have the current year almanac. Might as well have it on your boat. Might as well. And if you're an ocean sailor out there for months at a time, you got time on your hands. And it's kind of fun because there's a real feeling of accomplishment. And when you do get good at it, it only takes a few minutes, and then boom, you got your Latin long, and you're like, holy smokes, this thing is accurate. So, having said that, weather, well, barometer is pretty much what they used forever, and it really is accurate. I mean, nothing gives you a better real-time what is going on around you than when you watch a barometer bottom out and then start to rise. It's going to at least let you know exactly, pinpoint, real time, where you are compared to that low pressure system and what it's doing, whether it's moving away or it's still coming at you. And that is priceless information. That beats out any satellite model that any fancy thing is throwing at you. Now, having said that, that barometer is not going to tell you what's coming tomorrow, what's coming the next day. And that fancy, beautiful, wonderful download of Predict Wind or whatever forecasting grid files you get, that's going to give you some serious artillery in the whole war against weather when you're out at sea. And that is so valuable. It's so amazing. Now, there are all sorts of different platforms for it. I've been using Luck Grib, which is just an app that you can buy, and then you just have it forever. Predict Wind definitely seems to be the top tier for sure with some of the advances that they've got going on. Awesome. It's going to be a little pricier, I suppose, but it's definitely well worth it. You're getting more bang for your buck, and they have the tracking page and all that sort of stuff. This isn't an ad for Predict Wind, but I have utilized it, and I do see the benefits, especially compared to the old Grib files that I used to. I think the program was called like Z-Grib, and that's the one I used to get around the world, and I think on the next 1 or 2 voyages as well. But regardless, to be able to get that tech or to be able to get that data coming to you, you're going to need an Iridium Go, or you're going to need something that's going to provide you with that hotspot. Now, I am not an expert. There are a lot of different ways to get weather and all that sort of stuff, hook up to the internet, so to speak, when you're out at sea. The only 2 that I really know of are the Iridium Go, and then you've got Starlink. Now, John made a really good point when we were talking last time, because a lot of, Iridium Go gets a bit of guff because it's so low tech. It's not really a hotspot. There's only certain apps that you can use with it, all these sort of things. And Starlink is essentially a hotspot, a Wi-Fi hotspot. The only problem is, Starlink is bulky. You get that big antenna. With my Iridium Go, I don't have the marine antenna. I've never needed it. You basically just have the little tiny box, which is as big as big as an old school hard drive, and you just flip that little antenna up, and bing dong ding, and boom, and it's not pulling a lot of power. You can pack it away. You don't need to have it on all the time. It's pretty amazing, and to John's point, you could throw it in the oven in a lightning storm, which is like a Faraday cage. Now, I have never tested that 100%. Disclaimer, I've never been hit by lightning, knock on wood, and hope to never have to experience that. But there are times where essentially lightning storm's so bad, the Iridium Go, my computer, and my tablet and phone all go, boom, right into the oven. And that's where they hang out until the strikes stop happening, and then I get on with my business. And whether it works or not, I don't know. But it makes me feel good, so I'm going to keep doing it. You can't get away with that with the old Starlink. The Starlink's definitely not going to fit in the oven. Unless you have a big oven on your boat. Who knows? Maybe that's the case. But I do like the fact that I don't have to have some big dish mounted anywhere, Hopefully one day they'll have much, much smaller dishes for that sort of thing, but at this point they don't. So regardless, those are your options to getting that information. Now, that's easy. Okay, so you've got your weather coming in. Now you're onto the chart plotter screen. Oof, that one is kind of rough. And I know a lot of these can just be intermingled. You get your B&G, you get all these other things, and they're all tied together, NEMA 2000, whatever. I don't know, man. It all becomes a little bit overwhelming. Now, I utilize the sort of plotter navigation, if you will, or screen navigation. I utilize that when I'm getting in to shore. So if I am less than 5 miles from shore, that's when I'm starting to utilize that. Once I get out and I'm headed out to sea, those things never get turned on. I rarely ever. If I literally will turn my chart plotter on maybe once or twice just to look at the pretty colors, but that's it. There's nothing else. There's just no need for it out at sea. Ooh, excuse me. So, it really is. It's a godsend. It's a super huge help, especially on things like the intracoastal. Places like Maine, all these spots where there's lots of rocks, lots of shallows, ledges, all these sort of things. The information that can be provided by just you looking at a little tablet is absolutely amazing. The only drawback is sometimes you see there's this sort of little bit of an addiction, I guess, where people, even when they're a couple 100 miles offshore, still feel the need to be pulling up those screens and looking at what's going on and where they are. And it's sort of like, dude, what is the point in that? Turn that thing off and take in the beauty around you. Now, I don't want to go on like some tirade about this whole like tech versus nature and blah, blah, blah and all that stuff. It's a conversation that's just become so old. It's so obvious that, I don't even want to get into it. But that's where I think the charts really are sort of the beautiful thing. Once you get away from land, you get away from those dangers. You don't have to be some expert chart cartographer, excellent old school navigator or anything like that. It's very, very simple. You're pretty much just being, if you can read the Latin long off the side of a chart and you can use a pair of dividers and some parallels, you're going to be able to mark your Latin long down, and you just connect the dots after that. But there's something that happens when you utilize just that. It's absolutely amazing. The screens don't get fired up. You've got your AIS on, maybe you've got your VHF on. Those are the only two lights that are piercing through the night. You go up into the cockpit. You don't have any navigation stuff up there. You don't need it. You don't need it when you're up there. What you need, in my older brother's famous words, what you need to do is you need to have a completely dark, pitch black cockpit so no lights get up there, and you can watch that your eyes just adjust. And it's phenomenal. It's just the most amazing. If you give your eyes 30 minutes, no light at all, on the most pitch black dark night, you are going to start to see the horizon. Your eyes are such an incredible, amazing thing. The only problem is we never let them rise to their potential. And half the time nowadays, what's totally roasting your night vision is that need to pull out that screen. Oh my God, I'm diving back into that. Don't do it. So that's one recommendation there, I suppose. Where else am I trying to go with this one? Jeez. Let's pause here for a sec, collect my thoughts. All right, we're back. Here we go. Now we're thinking straight. You think, it's so crazy. You get off on those tangents sometimes, and the whole tech thing with me, I don't know. I don't know where it comes from. I don't know where the hate of it. I think it was because I really, really didn't have to get into it until late in my life. It wasn't until literally my early 30s that I actually had to start looking at screens. I didn't have a cell phone, like a proper work cell phone or anything, until I was in my 30s. I just never had one, never needed it, never wanted it, really. There was a short period in my late teens where everybody had them, and I was kind of like, I guess I'll get one. And then I ran up like a $200 bill, which thankfully my mommy paid for. But that was pretty much it for the cell phone and J-Roam. I didn't really like them, and I didn't see the necessity in them. And yeah, I don't know. The whole subject just gets me all riled up because I see people that just spend so much of their time looking at these things. And, back in the day, to sound like an old miser, we used to just get bored. And then we'd start looking around and try and come up with things, and we'd have to use a little thing called our imagination and creativity to go and figure out some fun thing to do. But it was also a great way to explore and discover things that we like to do, to find passions in our lives, to find those goals and build those dreams. Does that sound a little more, I don't know, productive than scrolling through some stupid social media site that you just bling, bling, bling? And, I'm as guilty as anybody. I don't scroll through them, but I sure as heck post on them. So I'm I'm shoveling the coal into the fire. The engine is still running because, I don't know. It's this odd thing, and I get it. You're in an airport. 90% of the people you're looking at all have devices in their hands. Yeah, being in the airport is a pretty annoying thing, but when I'm out at sea and I see people doing it and they're staring at the phones, oh my good gracious. That gets me hot. That gets the wires touching. Psst, sparks are flying at that point. And that's when, I don't know. There's just, I always said that if I had the means, if I ever struck it rich somehow, the first thing to go would be the smartphone. I'd go back to one of the old ones. And I actually have one of those old like Nokia ones, and just get a SIM card for that, erase all the old Soch stuff, and just reconnect with all the people, in my life and stuff, or not reconnect, but stay connected via talking, not even text, not even have the ability to do the old, what was it, T9 texting or whatever, something like that, but. That's me. I'm weird. I'm old school. I'm 45. What are you going to do? Hey, can't teach an old dog new tricks. But I do know that there's something to be said for not having something that prevents boredom, so to speak, quote unquote, because I don't know. I think most people, when they're thumbing through those things, are pretty bored as well. Anywho, back to the subject at hand, tech and what you need and what you can't do without, and trying not to get enveloped in too much. Now, one of the big things that we're working on these days is this new presentation, and a focal point of this new presentation for the corporate audience is telling kind of the story of the trip of 2022, the night of the knockdown, and what happened and why I actually ended up in that spot. Because right now we're dealing with a world which AI is now pretty much in our lives, and if you're starting to utilize it, it is sort of trying to tell you what the best way of going about things are and, giving you its input. And now when you have a decision to make, or when you're writing a paper, let's say, if you let AI take it over and say, okay, rewrite this for me, make it better, and then they rewrite it, and you read it and you're sort of like, I don't know, I kind of feel like I liked mine more. But now you're sort of going against your gut if you're sort of thinking, man, well, the AI is probably right because it's way smarter than a human, blah, blah, blah. Out at sea in 2022, I had all this information. I had all the charts for the currents, for the Gulf Stream, for all the eddies, the death zone, if you will, for someone in a little nor'easter all alone 500 miles from shore. And previous to this trip, I only ever knew what the wind was going to do. That was what I could download. That's what I could see and forecast, and that was it. Now, on this trip, I had the Iridium Go, and I had the other things, and was able to see what the currents were doing, and stupidly thought, well, the weather's not going to be great, but I'm going to be able to worm my way in and out of these things and probably even utilize them. That's how ignorant I was at that point. Now, again, previous to this, I would never have gone anywhere near the Gulf Stream. And I do have to say, caveat here, going through the what ifs does no one any good. What if I had hove to before I got to the stream? Maybe I would have been hit by the next storm that came up, which was far more intense. I don't know. So the what ifs are a little bit too... I don't want to delve into those too much. But this is a great example of going against your gut instinct, what you would normally do, because technology has fed you with this information that says, oh, hey, look, we can guide you through this. And you'll get through, and don't worry about it. All those old thoughts of like, oh, stay away from the Gulf Stream in this kind of weather, we can help you through that. You no longer have to abide by those rules. And so that's what I did essentially. Is I figured I'd cross the stream. I knew I could get across the stream before the storm hit, and I did barely, but I did. But then I was in the land of milk and eddies, circling around and going in odd directions and all this stuff, and basically come to find out the forecast model wasn't very good. And when I downloaded it the next day, I was able to see an updated model that actually knew, I guess, a little bit more and showed how I'd basically gone directly into like a 2.5 knot counter current. When it was blowing, I don't know how. It was blowing really, really hard. And that's what heaped those waves up, and that's what produced that rogue. That's what turned me over, blah, blah, blah. You know the story. Question is it better to have that information aboard? Because we all just heard me say it. As many aids to navigation as possible. But if those aids to navigation are making you question the knowledge and the experience that you have gained over the years, is that actually better to have it on there, or is it better for you not to? I don't know. That's the philosophical question from a sailor's perspective, or at least from mine. Now, I can answer, I guess, a little bit of that. When I go out on this next trip, am I going to not bring that stuff? Oh, hell no. I'm definitely going to bring it. I want to be able to see all this stuff in real time. Am I going to trust it as if it were gospel? Absolutely not. If I have an inkling and I think, this just doesn't add up, I don't like it, then I'm going to go with my gut instinct. And to hell with the forecast, to hell with the data, because, the choice is going to be mine anyway. I'm going to end up getting myself into or out of whatever situation comes up out at sea, and I have to sort of live with that. I kind of feel bad that I forgoed that whole that old time adage of, you don't go anywhere near the Gulf Stream if the weather's going to be bad. I really regret that, and I don't like regretting those things. And the best I can do is just learn from that mistake, never repeat that one again. But it's tricky because it's getting the forecasting and the apps and all that stuff is getting so good, and it's getting really precise. I mean, I'd almost say you could trust it for 4 days instead of 3. And even that is a stretch. Can you imagine if it does get to a point where a 10-day forecast is accurate to like 90%? That's just going to be absolutely ridiculous. That would even give a West Sail 32 enough time to get out of the way. Ba-dum-ba! So I don't know. It's tech and sailing. The problem used to be pretty straightforward. Tech just couldn't stand up to long bouts of offshore sailing. It would always fail. Almost every single delivery I went on that had a fancy computer back in the early 2000s, the computer always broke. And still, to this day, every once in a while, those things do break down. They stop working. They start malfunctioning. And then, if you don't have the hardware in there, if you don't have the hard disk or whatever it is, what was it? On one trip, we had to reset the entire B&G system, and luckily the owner of the vessel, shout out Johnny boy, he had all the little tiny chips that had all the charts on them, so he was able to reboot the whole system, no big deal. And I don't know. I mean, so to this day, it still happens. He still malfunctions. So I think lesson learned there is that no matter what, you always want to have the bare bones. You want to have the paper chart, and you want to have the backup handheld GPS, and then you're going to be really, really, really safe at that point. Really safe. Now, here's a question, a little devil's advocate sort of ish question. Would you, because all these little tech gadgets are spitting out your speed over the ground or your heading over the ground, course over the ground, COG, why do we need a compass? Oh, that might get a few feathers ruffled out there. I don't know. I would always have a compass. Maybe it's because the compass is just standard stock and trade. But a chart used to be standard stock and trade as well, and it no longer is, unfortunately. But I look at the compass all the time, and I know there's going to be some tricks that you can do to figure out what the currents are doing and things like that if you have a compass and you have your course over the ground from a little ingenious device. So I don't know. There's kind of a back and forth here and there and everywhere. I think the one thing you can't argue with is that if you are able to set sail and cross from, let's say, the East Coast to the Caribbean, and you do it with just a paper chart, a sextant, a compass, and a barometer, and you don't have any of the other tools, man, that feels good. It feels good. I've never done it. I have never done it. I've gotten close where we took sextant sights, or I took sextant sights, noon sights for most of the voyage, but I was always checking it with and against the GPS. The AIS. The AIS is exempt. I know I hinted on this before, but it is such a safety feature for a solo sailor that the AIS, there's an exemption. That one, I don't even think of that as tech. I think that's up there in the category of life raft, EPIRB, those sort of things, flares, sound signals, AIS. That just goes in there. It's just such a solid piece of tech. And yeah, I mean, people used to, and I know people that still do sail without a life raft, which to me sounds crazy. But I don't know very many people that sail without any sort of electronics on their boat at all. So who knows? But yeah, if you're able to make that trip and you do it old-timey style, there is a feeling of accomplishment there that you just aren't going to get when you're being fed the information. So that being said, let's hit over onto the old flip side. I do think it is pretty darn cool that you could go out on a boat, have complete and utter engine and electrical failure, everything gone. But in your pocket is a standard iPhone that has its own little GPS receptor in there. You got one little app on there, and if it's a relatively new phone and you only have to turn it on for 3 minutes every day at noon to check your position, and you're trying to sail from, Maine down to the BVI, chances are on that battery life, if you're only using it for those 3 minutes to mark your position on a chart, you'd be able to make it down there without too much problem. Crazy. That is so cool. It's so cool. I don't think it takes away from sailing. I don't think it takes away from seamanship. I think, again, it's not quite in the same realm of an EPIRB, an AIS, and a life raft, but it's darn close. So I think we got to pay homage to that. It is very convenient. It is very nice. But, again, just because you can sail across an ocean with an iPhone does not mean that that's all you need, and that is going to make up for or relieve you of the responsibility of learning the seamanship, learning the skills, getting the experience of just real world how to deal with it. Because that phone, you might have a copy of heavy weather sailing on there, but when the waves are 25 feet and the wind's blowing 45 knots, you can sit there, I guess, and read through it and see what to do. But in reality, we all know that's not the truth. You're going to be in that situation, and the experiences that you have are going to be the determining factor for whether or not you get through that storm system, whether your boat gets broken up, whether you end up in your life raft. And that is what I kind of want to close on here, and that's essentially talking about how you gain that experience. And it's very simple, and it's a time-honored tradition. That's why on all sailboats, you have this rank. You've got a captain, you got a mate, you got the crew. And that is essentially, in real-world terms, that's an apprentice, a journeyman, and a master. And you pass the knowledge down. And you put in the work, the grunt work, as the apprentice or as the crew member. You do as you're told, you take your licks, you do whatever you have to do, and you do your job well, and then maybe you get a better job, and then you're the mate, and now you got a little more responsibility, but you're still learning from that captain. Making a jump too quick, you're not getting it, you're cheating yourself. I still remember some of the great captains. Shout out Captain David Miles. He was an absolute legend. Got to cross the Atlantic Ocean for the first time under his skillful command, and that was absolutely amazing. I'm trying to think of some of the other greats that I was able to basically download information from. I'm drawing a blank right here, right now. That's pretty crazy. I know there are definitely some really, really good captains. But, at the same time, you can also learn from bad captains. I learned that most captains are terrible managers because they don't have to be, because there's that authoritarian dictatorship aboard a boat. A mutiny is illegal, so you have to do what you're told. At the same time, and so, once you are wearing that captain's hat, so to speak, nobody can really challenge you on what you're saying. And so absolute power corrupts absolutely, or at least it just, it makes it so that managerial skills and people-person skills and all that sort of stuff, unless you're really concerned about morale, ship's morale out on the boat. I've seen a lot of captains sort of not really care one iota. And I understand that. I understand it, but I don't do that. I don't like it. I think ship's morale is super important, but there is a time and place where, the captain is king out there, and there's a reason for that. They are responsible for your life and the condition of the vessel. And man, I love the fact that you literally, if you try to do a mutiny, man, you can end up in prison. I believe still legit. So there is that. But yeah, essentially my point being that that's how you get that experience. You not only get on the boat, But you listen to the people who have been doing it for years, who have the stories and have the experience, because they're going to share that with you. And it's absolutely an amazing thing from both ends of the spectrum, because as I get older now, I am finally at a point where I'm comfortable sharing the knowledge and experience that I have with other people. Whereas before, I never would have felt qualified to do that, and now I finally do. So I get to see both ends of it, and it's just a wonderful, wonderful process. And that stuff cannot be understated at all, and it's never going to be able to just be replaced by technology and by apps and by all that sort of stuff. You definitely want to have all the working experience. You want to know how to read a barometer and what you're looking for. You want to know how to plot your position on a paper chart. Yeah, sexting, it's a hobby. We didn't have to worry about that. Those are the things that you definitely want to make sure that you have those core skills. Then you add a little ketchup and mustard. You add a little GPS and a little route plotting, or weather routing software, and you add the Iridium Go, and you add all these sort of things. But that's accoutrement. That's not the meat. That's not the bread. The meat and bread are the barometer and the chart and the seamanship and all these sort of skills that you've built up. And then you try and make your life easier with the tech. That's all I'm trying to say. That's my rant. I'm sticking to it. Hopefully you enjoyed this show. And we've got some more interviews and stuff like that coming up. Reach out to the show if you want to hear from anybody else or about anybody else. Hopefully I'm about to get out on the ocean yet again for a trip to, Fort Pierce up to Norfolk. That would be a nice little delivery. Hit up the stream and rip it on a Sabre 45, a beautiful boat. Oh, this is the one we took down from Maine. So anyway, hope everybody's having a good spring. If you're in the north, find those morels. Cook them really well before you eat them, because they are poisonous. Other than that, thanks for listening to the show. Thank you, everybody, for the support. Till next time.